Right now, somewhere in your city, a plant is pushing through a crack in a sidewalk. It's got broad, ribbed leaves pressed flat against concrete, and most people step right over it. That plant, plantain, was documented by the Greek physician Dioscorides nearly 2,000 years ago as a wound healer. Roman soldiers packed it into field kits. Native American nations chewed the leaves into poultices for insect stings and cuts. A modern review in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology confirmed what those cultures already knew. The compound aucubin shows measurable anti-inflammatory and antimicrobial activity. Your grandmother might have called it a dooryard weed. Civil War medics called it essential. And clinical researchers are calling it surprisingly effective. You've been mowing over medicine. You've been pulling up pharmacy from your garden beds. And this list is going to change what you see when you look at a ditch, a vacant lot, or the edges of a trail. One plant ahead has over 2,000 years of battlefield documentation, and science just caught up to explain why. Another one is literally the wild ancestor of a drug sitting in your medicine cabinet right now. You probably made a wish on one as a kid, blew the white seeds into the wind, and never thought about it again. But dandelion, the bitter pharmacy, is one of the most extensively used medicinal plants in human history, and the fact that we treat it as a lawn nuisance might be one of the greatest disconnects between modern culture and traditional knowledge. In traditional Chinese medicine, a dandelion root has been prescribed as a liver and digestive tonic for centuries. Across Europe, spring dandelion greens were eaten as a cleansing ritual after long winters, not out of superstition, but because the bitter compounds genuinely stimulate digestive secretion. During famines in Ireland, Greece, and rural Appalachia, dandelion wasn't a backup food, it was the food. The whole plant is edible, root, leaf, flower, and it's staggeringly nutrient-dense. Modern research has validated what those traditions pointed toward. Dandelion has confirmed diuretic properties, which is why its French folk name, pissenlit, translates to exactly what you think it does. The root contains inulin, a prebiotic fiber that supports gut microbiome health, and the leaves carry an antioxidant profile that rivals many cultivated greens. The active compounds, sesquiterpene lactones, are the source of that distinctive bitterness, and they're the same class of molecules that stimulate bile production and kickstart sluggish digestion. One review in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology noted that dandelion extracts showed promising hepatoprotective and anti-inflammatory effects in preliminary studies. People drink dandelion root tea for digestive support. They eat the young greens in salads. They use the roasted root as a coffee substitute, and all of it grows for free in every climate zone on the continent. So why is it forgotten? Because it's everywhere. Because no one can patent a weed. Because there's no profit margin in telling people the most powerful bitter tonic they'll ever find is already growing in their yard. Think of dandelion as a full-spectrum supplement disguised as a lawn pest. You've spent years fighting it. It's been trying to feed you the whole time. Now look down, literally. The next plant on this list is probably within 20 feet of you right now if you're anywhere near a footpath, a gravel lot, or a patch of compacted earth. Plantain, the trailside first aid kit. And no, not the banana relative. We're talking about Plantago major, the low-growing rosette with thick ribbed leaves that feel slightly rubbery when you pinch it between your fingers. It smells like green, like crushed grass with a faintly mineral edge. And it thrives in the exact places most plants can't. Sidewalk cracks, gravel driveways, the packed-down edges of hiking trails. Roman legionnaires carried plantain as a wound treatment on campaigns across Europe. Native American nations across North America used chewed plantain leaves as poultices for bee stings, spider bites, and shallow cuts. Anglo-Saxon herbalists listed it among their 9 sacred herbs. The mechanism is real. Plantain contains aucubin, an iridoid glycoside with documented anti-inflammatory and antimicrobial properties. It also contains allantoin, the same compound found in expensive skin repair creams, which promotes cell proliferation and tissue recovery. Studies in wound healing models have shown plantain leaf extracts accelerating epithelial closure. One ethnobotanical survey described it as one of the most universally applied wound herbs across unrelated cultures. In practical terms, people still use fresh plantain leaves as an immediate field poultice for minor cuts, stings, and skin irritation. Chew a leaf, apply it, and the itching stops. Others dry the leaves for teas traditionally used to soothe irritated airways. It grows in every state. It survives foot traffic. It regenerates after mowing. And it was replaced by a tube of petroleum-based antibiotic ointment that costs $8 and contains compounds you can't pronounce. Plantain is like having an emergency room growing in the cracks of your driveway. The fact that it specifically thrives where people walk, as if it positioned itself to be found, is either a coincidence or something your ancestors understood better than we do. Here's where perception starts to shift. Because if a sidewalk weed has documented wound healing power, what does that say about the plant sitting in a tea bag you've been dismissing your whole life? More chamomile, the gentle knockout, is arguably the most underestimated medicinal plant on the planet precisely because it's so familiar. The Egyptians dedicated it to their sun god and used it as a fever remedy. The Greeks called it kamai melon, ground apple, because of its sweet, apple-like fragrance when crushed. During World War II, field medics in multiple theaters brewed chamomile tea to calm soldiers dealing with stress and digestive disruption in combat zones. That's not folklore, that's battlefield triage. The science behind it centers on a flavonoid called apigenin, which binds to benzodiazepine receptors in the brain, the same receptors targeted by prescription anti-anxiety medications. Clinical trials published in journals including Phytomedicine have shown chamomile extract significantly reducing symptoms of generalized anxiety compared to placebo. Additional trials support its traditional use for gastrointestinal discomfort, showing smooth muscle relaxation in the digestive tract. Pick a fresh chamomile flower and hold it close. It smells like honey and dried hay with that unmistakable apple sweetness. The small daisy-like heads grow low on branching stems, and the feathery leaves feel almost fern-like between your fingers. It grows wild across meadows, roadsides, and disturbed soils throughout Europe and North America. People have been steeping it for centuries. For sleep, for nerves, for upset stomachs, for teething children, and yet modern culture reduced it to a punchline. Just chamomile tea, as if binding to the same neurological receptors as pharmaceutical anxiolytics is casual, as if a plant that calmed soldiers in a war zone is something to dismiss. Chamomile got trivialized because it's gentle, but gentle and weak are not the same thing. This is a lullaby with a pharmacology degree. Now we're stacking evidence, and the pattern should be getting uncomfortable. Because peppermint, the gut reset button, is another one you thought you already knew. You've tasted it in gum, toothpaste, candy canes. But peppermint's medicinal use stretches back to ancient Egypt, where dried leaves were found in pyramids dating to around 1000 BCE. Greek and Roman physicians prescribed it for digestive complaints. Traditional European herbalism leaned on it so heavily that it became one of the foundational herbs in virtually every folk pharmacopoeia on the continent. Modern gastroenterology caught up. Peppermint oil capsules are now one of the most clinically studied natural interventions for irritable bowel syndrome. Multiple randomized controlled trials, published in journals like the BMJ and the Journal of Clinical Gastroenterology, have demonstrated that enteric-coated peppermint oil significantly reduces abdominal pain, bloating, and bowel urgency in IBS patients. The mechanism is menthol, peppermint's primary active compound. Menthol acts as a calcium channel blocker in smooth muscle tissue, which means it directly relaxes the involuntary contractions that cause cramping and spasms in the gut. It also activates cold-sensitive receptors, which is why it produces that cooling sensation, and why it's been used traditionally for headaches applied to the temples. Crush a fresh peppermint leaf between your fingers, and the smell hits immediately, sharp, bright, almost electric. The leaves are serrated, slightly fuzzy underneath, and they grow aggressively along streams, garden borders, and anywhere with consistent moisture. People use peppermint tea for nausea, bloating, and post-meal discomfort. They inhale it for sinus congestion. They rub diluted oil on temples for tension headaches. And all of this, every single application, traces back thousands of years through cultures that never communicated with each other. Peppermint is an antispasmodic hiding in your candy aisle. The same compound in your breath mint is a clinically validated gut relaxant. You just never read the fine print. And now we close this first act with one that literally sat in the wound kits of battlefield surgeons. Calendula, the skin whisperer, is the bright orange or gold flower you've probably seen in ornamental gardens without realizing you were looking at one of the most documented topical healing agents in herbal medicine. During the American Civil War, doctors applied calendula preparations directly to open wounds to prevent infection and promote tissue repair. In Ayurvedic medicine, calendula has been used for centuries for skin inflammation, burns, and ulcerations. European herbalists called it pot marigold and grew it in kitchen gardens specifically for its medicinal applications, not its beauty. The chemistry backs it up. A calendula contains triterpenoids, particularly faradiol, which have been shown in studies to exhibit significant anti-inflammatory and wound-healing activity. It also contains flavonoids and carotenoids that contribute to its antioxidant profile. Clinical studies on burn patients have demonstrated faster epithelialization with calendula-based preparations compared to standard petroleum-based treatments. One clinical trial published in the Journal of Clinical Oncology even found calendula ointment effective in reducing radiation dermatitis in breast cancer patients undergoing treatment. Touch a calendula petal, and it feels almost waxy, substantial, not fragile. The flower heads are dense with tightly layered petals in shades of deep gold to orange. Crush one, and there's a resinous, slightly peppery scent. It grows easily in temperate gardens, in sunny patches of disturbed soil, and along the edges of fields. People use calendula-infused oils for dry or irritated skin. They steep it for topical washes. They apply salves to minor burns, rashes, and slow-healing scrapes. And it was replaced by tubes of petroleum jelly and synthetic hydrocortisone, products that suppress symptoms rather than support the tissue itself. Calendula is what your skin was actually asking for before the pharmacy told you otherwise. Context bridge. Here's where you step back and notice the pattern forming. 5 plants. Every single one of them grows within walking distance of most people's homes. Every single one has documentation spanning centuries. Across traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurveda, European herbalism, Native American practice, and battlefield medicine. And every single one has modern research confirming at least some of what traditional practitioners already knew. The pattern isn't coincidence. Multiple knowledge systems, separated by oceans and centuries, converging on the same plants for the same purposes. Modern pharmacy didn't disprove these traditions. It replaced them, with convenience, with packaging, with profit models that require patentable molecules. The knowledge didn't disappear. It just got buried under marketing. And we're only getting started, because everything up to this point has been the warm-up. The plants ahead are where things get genuinely powerful, and if the first 5 surprised you, you're not ready for what's coming next. This next plant is the reason ancient Greek warriors had a word for field medicine that literally translates to the herb of Achilles. Yarrow, the battlefield closer, earned its reputation in the most extreme proving ground imaginable: open wounds on active battlefields. Legend says Achilles used yarrow to treat his soldiers' injuries during the Trojan War, and while that's mythology, the practice it points to is real. Roman military medics documented yarrow as a hemostatic, a plant that stops bleeding. Medieval battlefield herbalists packed it into wounds. Native American nations used it independently for the same purpose, chewing leaves into poultices for cuts and lacerations. The chemistry is specific. Yarrow contains achillene, an alkaloid that has demonstrated blood clotting support in wound applications, and thujone, are a compound with documented antimicrobial activity. It also contains chamazoline, the same anti-inflammatory compound found in chamomile, which gives yarrow's essential oil its distinctive blue color. Studies have confirmed yarrow's astringent and hemostatic properties in topical application. One ethnobotanical review described it as the most consistently documented wound herb across Western herbal traditions. Find yarrow, and you'll recognize it by its feathery, finely divided leaves, almost fern-like but tougher, growing in flat-topped clusters of small white or pale pink flowers. Crush a stem, and it releases a sharp, slightly camphoraceous scent with an earthy bitterness. It grows in meadows, along roadsides, in dry grasslands, and at the edges of trails across North America and Europe. People use dried yarrow in teas for fever support and as a topical wash for minor wounds. Field herbalists still carry it as a trail first aid staple, and it was replaced by gauze and synthetic clotting agents. Effective, yes, but this plant was the original version. Yarrow is what first aid looked like before first aid kits existed. It grew where soldiers fell, and it worked. If yarrow is the battlefield closer, then elderberry, the epidemic shield, is what people reached for when the threat wasn't a wound, but a wave. Across medieval Europe, the elder tree was considered so powerful that folklore warned against cutting one down without asking permission. That reverence wasn't superstition, it was risk management. Elder was the community's pharmacy. During plague years, an elderberry preparations were among the most commonly administered folk remedies across Northern Europe. In traditional European herbalism, elderberry syrup was the standard response to seasonal illness, coughs, fevers, congestion. The berries are deep purple-black, growing in heavy clusters that stain your fingers the moment you crush them, with a tart, slightly musky taste that's unmistakably medicinal. Modern virology has taken notice. Multiple clinical trials have demonstrated that elderberry extract significantly reduces the duration and severity of influenza symptoms. A meta-analysis published in Complementary Therapies in Medicine concluded that elderberry supplementation substantially reduced upper respiratory symptoms. The active compounds, anthocyanins, and flavonoids appear to inhibit viral replication at early stages of infection. Some studies suggest they also modulate cytokine response, supporting immune regulation rather than just immune stimulation. That distinction matters. People use elderberry syrup during cold and flu season, and it's one of the few traditional remedies that's crossed over into mainstream supplement shelves. But here's the twist. The same compound that costs $15 in a bottle at the pharmacy grows wild on the edges of forests, streams, and rural roadsides across the temperate world. The elder tree is unmistakable. Clusters of tiny white flowers in spring, heavy purple blackberry clusters in late summer, and bark with a corky, ridged texture. Elderberry is like an immune shield that's been standing in hedgerows for millennia. The research didn't discover its power. The research just finally measured what entire villages already depended on to get through winter. Now take a breath, because this next one is for everyone who's ever had a cough that just wouldn't quit. Mullein, the lung cleaner, is a plant you've probably driven past 1,000 times without registering it. But once you know what it looks like, you'll never miss it again. It stands tall, sometimes 6 feet, with a thick central stalk covered in dense velvety leaves that feel like soft flannel when you run your thumb across them. The whole plant is covered in fine silver-gray hairs, giving it an almost ghostly appearance in dry fields and along gravel roads. In Appalachian folk medicine, mullein was smoked, yes, smoked, for respiratory congestion. The logic seems contradictory, but the practice was documented across multiple mountain communities. Dried mullein leaves were rolled and inhaled to open airways. Native American nations used mullein tea for coughs and chest tightness. European herbalists prescribed it for bronchial irritation dating back to Dioscorides. The active compounds include saponins, which loosen and help expel mucus from the respiratory tract, and mucilage, a gel-like substance that coats and soothes inflamed mucous membranes. Together, they function as both an expectorant and a demulcent, loosening congestion while calming irritation simultaneously. Research reviews have supported mullein's traditional respiratory applications, with one review noting its long-documented use for respiratory support consistent with its known phytochemical profile. It grows wild in dry, sunny, disturbed soils, roadsides, abandoned lots, railway embankments, construction sites. People steep dried mullein leaves and flowers into tea for persistent coughs, chest congestion, and sinus pressure. Some infuse it into oil for ear discomfort. And it was replaced by over-the-counter cough syrups loaded with artificial flavors and dextromethorphan. Mullein is like a maintenance crew for your lungs, gentle, thorough, and working on both ends of the problem at once. The stuff growing in your local abandoned lot might be the best respiratory ally you've never considered. If this is changing how you look at the plants around you, keep going, because we're building toward something. And the plants ahead are where historical documentation and modern science overlap in ways that'll genuinely surprise you. Red clover, the blood builder, is that common meadow flower with the pinkish-purple puffball head that children pick in summer fields without knowing they're holding one of the most extensively studied plants in women's health research. Traditional herbalists across Europe and North America used red clover as a blood purifier and women's tonic for centuries, recommending it for hormonal transitions and general vitality. In Russian folk medicine, it was prescribed for respiratory complaints. In traditional Chinese practice, related clover species appeared in formulations for circulation. The modern interest centers on isoflavones, plant-based compounds that have estrogen-like activity in the body. Red clover contains 4 primary isoflavones, and clinical studies have examined their effects on menopausal symptoms, with several trials showing modest but measurable reductions in hot flash frequency. A Cochrane review examined the evidence and found some support for symptom relief, though it noted that results varied across preparations and dosages. The flowers smell faintly sweet, like honey mixed with fresh-cut hay, and the trefoil leaves have that characteristic pale chevron marking. It grows in meadows, pastures, lawns, and along sunny roadsides across temperate regions. People steep the dried flower heads into tea for hormonal support and general wellness. Some use it in topical preparations for skin irritation. The evidence here is honest, stronger for traditional use than for clinical certainty, but the research is active and ongoing. Red clover got sidelined because synthetic hormone therapies dominated the conversation for decades, and a meadow flower couldn't compete with pharmaceutical marketing budgets. But the isoflavones are real, the traditional use is documented across centuries, and the research continues to accumulate. Sometimes the strongest medicine is the one still quietly flowering in the field while the world argues about pills. Now, here's one that'll make you rethink the word weed permanently. Stinging nettle, the iron forge, is the plant most people know only from the sharp stinging pain of accidentally brushing against it. Those hollow, needle-like hairs on the stems and leaves inject histamine and formic acid on contact, producing an immediate burning rash. So your first instinct is to avoid it forever. Your ancestors' instinct was to harvest it. Vikings ate nettle as a staple green. Medieval European households relied on nettle soup as a spring tonic when stored food ran low and bodies needed mineral replenishment. In Russian and Scandinavian traditions, nettle was beaten against arthritic joints deliberately, a practice called urtication, to provoke circulation and reduce inflammation through counter-irritation. That sounds extreme, but a small pilot study published in the Journal of the Royal Society of Medicine actually found that urtication with fresh nettle leaves reduced pain in osteoarthritis patients. Nettle is a mineral powerhouse. It contains significant levels of iron, calcium, magnesium, and silica. Studies have also shown that nettle extract has anti-inflammatory effects, particularly in relation to allergic rhinitis, seasonal allergies. One randomized trial found that freeze-dried nettle capsules were rated effective by a majority of allergy sufferers compared to placebo. The mechanism involves inhibition of several inflammatory pathways, including histamine receptor interaction. Find nettle near streams, at forest edges, in damp shade, and along fence lines. It grows in dense patches, sometimes shoulder-high, with serrated, heart-shaped leaves on square stems. The sting disappears completely when the plant is cooked, dried, or steeped. Heat neutralizes the formic acid. People drink nettle tea for allergy support, iron supplementation, and general mineral intake. They cook young spring nettles like spinach. And the plant that stings you on contact might be one of the most nutrient-dense greens available for free in the wild. That's not irony. That's a security system protecting something valuable. Transition bridge. If you're realizing how much knowledge has been hiding in plain sight, you're not alone. Help this reach people who need it, because this information shouldn't stay buried. And keep going, because the next tier is where things get genuinely remarkable. Echinacea, the immune alarm, has one of the most fascinating stories of cultural rediscovery on this list. Plains nations of North America used echinacea more extensively than almost any other medicinal plant. The Cheyenne used it for sore throats, the Lakota used it for pain and snakebite. The Pawnee used it for headaches and as a general infection fighter. When European settlers encountered it through indigenous knowledge, it rapidly entered American eclectic medicine in the late 1800s and became one of the most prescribed botanical medicines in the country, until the rise of antibiotics pushed it aside in the early 20th century. Then Germany revived it. German researchers conducted extensive clinical trials on echinacea through the mid to late 20th century, making it one of the most studied herbs in the European pharmacopoeia. Meta-analyses have shown modest but statistically significant reductions in cold duration and severity with echinacea supplementation, particularly when taken at symptom onset. The active compounds, alkamides and polysaccharides, appear to stimulate innate immune cell activity, on essentially putting the immune system on higher alert rather than directly killing pathogens. Echinacea's distinctive purple coneflower is hard to miss, tall, daisy-like, with a raised central cone and drooping petals in shades of purple-pink. The root, when chewed, produces a distinctive tingling, numbing sensation on the tongue. That's the alkamides at work. It grows wild in prairies and open grasslands across central and eastern North America. People take echinacea tinctures and teas at the first sign of a cold. Evidence varies by species and preparation. Echinacea purpurea has the strongest clinical backing, while traditional use often emphasized Echinacea angustifolia root. What doesn't vary is the centuries of documented use across multiple nations, followed by modern validation that confirmed the mechanism. So the immune system's alarm bell was growing in the prairie this entire time. We just stopped listening when we got louder pills. Now, this next one is hiding in every herb garden in the Western world, and almost nobody knows what it's truly capable of. Lemon balm, the calm sharpener, is a mint family plant with soft, wrinkled, light green leaves that release a bright citrus fragrance the instant you brush against them. The scent is unmistakable. Clean lemon with a green, herbal undertone and a slightly sweet finish. It grows easily in gardens, along walkways, and in shaded patches where it tends to spread vigorously. In the Middle Ages, lemon balm was called the elixir of life by Paracelsus, who believed it could completely revitalize the body. Sir Carmelite nuns in 14th century France created Carmelite water, a lemon balm tonic, that became one of the most popular health remedies in European apothecary for centuries. Swiss physician and alchemist Paracelsus called it the key to restoring vitality. The modern science reveals why those reputations stuck. Lemon balm contains rosmarinic acid, which has demonstrated anxiolytic properties in clinical settings. It also appears to modulate GABA activity, similar to chamomile but with a twist. Studies suggest lemon balm may simultaneously reduce anxiety and improve cognitive performance. A study published in Psychosomatic Medicine found that participants taking lemon balm extract showed increased calmness and improved working memory under stress conditions. That combination, calm plus sharp, is rare and is what makes lemon balm unique. It's not sedating in the way valerian is. It's clarifying. People steep fresh or dried lemon balm leaves for anxiety, sleep onset, and stress relief. Some use it as a culinary herb in salads and desserts. Traditionally, it's been applied topically for cold sores, and preliminary research on its antiviral properties against herpes simplex has been promising. Lemon balm was forgotten because it's gentle, because it tastes pleasant, and because anything that doubles as a salad ingredient doesn't get taken seriously as medicine. But calming the mind while sharpening it isn't gentle. It's sophisticated. This is the plant your brain has been waiting for. We're closing in on the legendary tier now. But first, one more that earned its place across 5 millennia and 3 continents. Ginger, the nausea killer, is so embedded in global cuisine that most people forget it was medicine first, food second. The knobby pale gold rhizome, with its papery tan skin and fiery, warming bite, has been prescribed in Ayurvedic medicine for over 5,000 years. Traditional Chinese medicine lists it as a foundational herb for digestive stagnation and cold conditions. Ancient Greek physicians recommended it for stomach ailments. Arab traders spread it across the Mediterranean, where it became one of the most sought-after medicinal spices in medieval Europe. The clinical data is substantial. Ginger has been studied extensively for nausea, and it delivers. Randomized controlled trials have demonstrated its effectiveness against chemotherapy-induced nausea, postoperative nausea, and pregnancy-related morning sickness. A meta-analysis in the journal Nutrients confirmed significant anti-nausea effects across multiple contexts. The mechanism involves gingerols and shogols, pungent compounds that act on serotonin receptors in the gut and accelerate gastric emptying, reducing the signals that trigger nausea. Slice a fresh ginger root, and the aroma is immediate, sharp, warm, almost peppery with a citrus undertone. The flesh is fibrous, juicy, and pale yellow. The burn on the tongue builds gradually, radiating warmth. People grate it into tea for nausea, cold symptoms, and digestive discomfort. They chew crystallized ginger for motion sickness. They use it in anti-inflammatory preparations. Says gingerols have also shown measurable COX-2 inhibition in laboratory studies, the same pathway targeted by common over-the-counter pain relievers. Ginger got normalized into invisibility. It's in your stir-fry, your soda, your cookie recipe. But 5,000 years ago, it was prescribed by physicians, not chefs. The most powerful anti-nausea agent in the natural world has been sitting in your spice drawer, waiting for you to remember what it actually is. Transition bridge. Everything you've seen so far has been building to this. We've moved through the overlooked, the dismissed, and the surprisingly powerful. Now we enter the legendary tier, the plants with histories so dramatic and modern validations so strong that they fundamentally challenge what you think you know about where medicine comes from. And we start with the one that changed the world. Willow bark, the original aspirin, is the payoff to one of the biggest curiosity loops in pharmaceutical history. Around 400 BCE, Hippocrates prescribed chewing willow bark for pain and fever. Egyptian medical papyri documented the same application centuries earlier. Native American nations used willow bark tea for headaches and inflammation independently across multiple tribal traditions. For millennia, across continents that had no contact with each other, people converged on the same tree for the same reason. In 1828, a German pharmacist isolated the active compound, salicin. The body converts salicin into salicylic acid, which reduces pain and inflammation. By 1897, Bayer synthesized a modified version, acetyl salicylic acid, and called it aspirin. SAS, the most widely used drug in modern history, is a modified copy of a compound that willow trees have been producing for millions of years. A willow tree stands near most rivers, streams, and wetlands in the northern hemisphere. The bark is rough, deeply furrowed on older trees, and when you peel a strip from a young branch, it tastes aggressively bitter. That bitterness is the salicin, And it's the same bitterness you'd taste if you chewed an aspirin tablet. The branches are long, flexible, and often drooping toward water. Traditional preparations involved steeping the inner bark as tea for pain, fever, and inflammation. People still use willow bark extract today as a gentler alternative. As some evidence suggests, it produces fewer gastrointestinal side effects than synthesized aspirin. Though evidence on this point varies, and professional guidance is appropriate for anyone managing chronic pain. The tree that gave us the world's most famous drug is still growing by the river. It didn't need a laboratory, it didn't need a patent. It needed about 60 million years of evolution and a few thousand years of human attention. Aspirin didn't invent pain relief, it borrowed it. If the willow bark revelation shifts something in your thinking, good. Hold that feeling because the next one operates on the other end of human experience. Not pain, but sleep. Valerian, the sleep root, has one of the most intensely documented sedative histories in Western herbalism. Roman physicians, including Galen, are prescribed it for insomnia in the 2nd century. The name itself may derive from the Latin valere, meaning to be strong or to be well. During World War I, valerian was administered to soldiers and civilians suffering shell shock and combat-related anxiety, an early form of what we now understand as PTSD treatment. In medieval Europe, it was one of the most commonly recommended herbs for nervous conditions. And here's where it gets interesting pharmacologically. Valerian root contains valerianic acid, which has been shown to inhibit the breakdown of gamma-aminobutyric acid, GABA, in the brain. GABA is the primary inhibitory neurotransmitter, the one responsible for calming neural activity. When GABA levels are maintained, the brain quiets. You fall asleep. Multiple meta-analyses have examined valerian for sleep, with results suggesting modest but genuine improvements in sleep quality, particularly for people with difficulty falling asleep. One systematic review in the American Journal of Medicine concluded that valerian might improve sleep quality without producing side effects. The word might matters. This is honest science, not a miracle claim, but the convergence of 2,000 years of documented sedative use with a plausible GABA-modulating mechanism is not coincidence. Dig up a valerian root and you'll understand immediately why it's memorable. The smell is powerful, earthy, pungent, almost musty in a way that some people find deeply unpleasant. The plant itself is tall, with clusters of small white or pink flowers and feathery divided leaves. It grows in damp meadows along riverbanks, and at forest edges across Europe and North America. People use valerian root tincture, or tea, 30 to 60 minutes before bed, specifically for sleep onset. It was replaced by prescription sedatives and over-the-counter sleep aids, many of which carry dependency risks that valerian does not. The sleep root has been putting humans to rest for 2 millennia. The pharmaceutical industry just found more expensive ways to do the same thing. Now we enter territory that's generated more scientific attention than arguably any other plant on this list. Turmeric, the inflammation tamer, is the golden orange rhizome that's been a cornerstone of Ayurvedic medicine for over 4,000 years. In traditional Indian medicine, it was prescribed for joint pain, digestive complaints, skin conditions, and respiratory issues. It held sacred status in Hindu ceremonies. Southeast Asian traditional systems used it broadly, and modern science responded with extraordinary interest. Over 12,000 peer-reviewed studies have been published on curcumin, turmeric's primary active compound. That number is not a typo. Curcumin has demonstrated anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, and neuroprotective properties across hundreds of in vitro and animal studies and a growing number of human clinical trials. Its primary mechanism involves inhibiting NF-κB, a protein complex that plays a central role in inflammatory gene expression. In plain language, curcumin interferes with the molecular switch that turns on inflammation. Clinical trials have shown benefits for joint discomfort, with some studies finding curcumin extracts comparable to ibuprofen for osteoarthritis symptoms. But here's the honest caveat that separates responsible information from hype. Curcumin has notoriously poor bioavailability. Your body absorbs very little of it on its own. The traditional Ayurvedic solution was to combine it with black pepper, which contains piperine, a compound shown to increase curcumin absorption by up to 2,000%. Modern supplement formulations now routinely include piperine or use lipid-based delivery systems for the same reason. Cut a fresh turmeric rhizome, and the color is startling, deep orange gold that stains everything it touches. The smell is warm, earthy, slightly bitter with a faint mustard-like pungency. The plant grows in tropical and subtropical climates with broad, lance-shaped leaves rising from the rhizome. People use turmeric in cooking, in golden milk preparations, and in concentrated supplement form for inflammatory support. It's not a cure-all. The hype sometimes outpaces the evidence. But 4,000 years of Ayurvedic use, followed by 12,000 published studies, isn't a trend. It's a convergence. Turmeric is what happens when ancient wisdom generates so much clinical curiosity that modern science can't stop studying it. This next one requires a different kind of honesty, because it's one of the most powerful plants on this list, and one of the most important to use with full awareness. St. John's wort, the mood lifter, is a bright yellow wildflower that's been used for emotional and psychological conditions since the Crusades. Antwen knights reportedly carried it for wound healing and what medieval physicians described as melancholia. Hold a leaf up to the light and you'll see tiny translucent dots. Those are oil glands containing hypericin and hyperforin, the two compounds responsible for its documented psychological effects. Crush the flower buds between your fingers, and they release a reddish-purple stain. The whole plant has a faintly resinous, herbaceous scent. In Germany, St. John's wort extract has been a standard clinical treatment for mild to moderate depression for decades. Prescribed by physicians, covered by insurance, and backed by rigorous trials. Multiple meta-analyses, including a major Cochrane review, concluded that St. John's wort was significantly more effective than placebo for mild to moderate depression and comparable to standard SSRIs, with fewer reported side effects in the studied populations. Hyperforin appears to inhibit the reuptake of serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine, a mechanism remarkably similar to conventional antidepressants. Hypericin contributes additional neuromodulatory effects. But here is the critical qualification. St. John's wort has well-documented interactions with numerous pharmaceutical drugs, including oral contraceptives, blood thinners, immunosuppressants, and other antidepressants. It accelerates drug metabolism through cytochrome P450 enzyme induction, potentially reducing the effectiveness of concurrent medications. This is not a minor footnote. It's essential safety information. Anyone considering St. John's wort alongside other medications must consult a healthcare provider. It grows wild in meadows, roadsides, and dry grasslands across Europe and North America. The plant is modest, growing 1 to 3 feet tall, with opposite leaves and clusters of 5-petaled yellow flowers. People use standardized extracts under professional guidance. And this is the core paradox. A wildflower growing in ditches across 2 continents is clinically comparable to pharmaceutical antidepressants in certain applications. It's not a replacement for professional care, but it is a reminder that the line between weed and medicine was never drawn by nature. It was drawn by commerce. We close Act 3 with the one that's been quietly saving lives since before recorded history had a name for what it was doing. Garlic, the ancient antibiotic, might seem like a strange entry on a list of forgotten plants, because everyone knows garlic. You cook with it, you eat it daily. But what most people don't know is that garlic was medicine long before it was food, and its antimicrobial power was validated before antibiotics even existed. Egyptian records show garlic rations issued to pyramid builders around 2600 BCE, not as flavoring, but to maintain worker health and stamina. Greek Olympic athletes consumed it for performance. Roman soldiers ate it for endurance and infection prevention on campaigns. During World War I, when antiseptic supplies ran short, British and Russian field medics applied crushed garlic directly to infected wounds. And they called it Russian penicillin. Louis Pasteur himself documented garlic's antibacterial properties in 1858, long before Alexander Fleming's discovery of penicillin. The active compound is allicin, which is produced when garlic cloves are crushed or chopped, breaking the cell walls and allowing the enzyme allinase to convert alliin into allicin. Allicin has demonstrated broad-spectrum antimicrobial activity in laboratory studies, effective against bacteria, fungi, and even some viruses. It disrupts microbial enzyme function at a molecular level. Clinical research has also shown garlic supplementation supporting modest reductions in blood pressure and cholesterol, though results vary by preparation and dosage. Break a fresh garlic clove, and the smell is immediate and unmistakable, pungent, sulfurous, and sharp. The papery white skin peels to reveal smooth, ivory-colored cloves with a firm, slightly sticky texture. It grows from bulbs in temperate climates worldwide and has been cultivated for so long that its wild ancestor is debated. People use raw garlic for immune support, cooked garlic for cardiovascular maintenance, and aged garlic extract in supplement form. The stuff you mince into pasta sauce was battlefield antiseptic, Olympian fuel, and anti-plague measure across 3 continents and 4,000 years. Garlic didn't get forgotten, it got reclassified, from medicine to condiment, from physician's tool to pizza topping. But allicin doesn't care what you call it. It works the same way it did when Pasteur first proved it. Der Transition Bridge. We've traveled through 20 plants now, from sidewalk weeds to battlefield medicines to the ancestors of modern pharmaceuticals. And if the pattern has been building in your mind the way it should, you've already started to see it. The knowledge was never lost. It was replaced. Convenience replaced skill. Patents replaced plants. Marketing replaced memory. But the plants are still here. And this final act is about what you do with that realization. Aloe vera, the living bandage, might be the clearest example of a plant whose power everyone vaguely acknowledges, but almost nobody fully appreciates. The Egyptians called it the plant of immortality and included it in burial offerings for pharaohs. Cleopatra reportedly used it in her skincare regimen. Our Greek and Roman physicians documented it for wound healing and digestive complaints. Traditional systems across Africa, the Caribbean, India, and Central America used aloe gel independently for burns, cuts, and skin irritation. And unlike many plants on this list, aloe crossed into modern medicine without losing its reputation entirely. The gel from the inner leaf contains asamanin, a polysaccharide with documented immunomodulatory and wound-healing properties. Clinical studies on burn patients have demonstrated faster healing times with aloe vera gel compared to conventional treatments in certain wound types. Research published in the Annals of Dermatology found significant improvements in skin hydration and wound closure with aloe application. The plant itself is unmistakable: thick, fleshy, lance-shaped leaves with serrated edges, or growing in rosettes from a central base. Slice one open and clear, viscous gel oozes from the inner leaf, cool to the touch and mildly bitter in taste, with a faint green plant sap scent. It grows on windowsills worldwide, in arid gardens, in desert landscapes, and in pots on porches across every continent. People apply the raw gel directly to minor burns, sunburns, insect bites, and dry skin. They blend it into smoothies for digestive soothing, though internal use is less well studied and warrants caution. Aloe is like a first response medical kit that grows on your kitchen counter. And the fact that millions of people keep one in their house without fully understanding what they have, a plant that pharaohs considered sacred and modern dermatology confirms as therapeutic, might be the perfect summary of everything this list has been about. The answer was sitting on your windowsill. You just never asked it the right question. And now, the last plant. And it's not some exotic specimen from a distant jungle. It's on your spice rack. It's in your garden. You've smelled it 1,000 times and never once thought of it as medicine. Rosemary, the memory guardian, closes this list because it captures the full arc of what we've been building toward. Greek scholars wore rosemary garlands while studying, believing it sharpened recall and concentration. Shakespeare wrote, "There's rosemary, aye, that's for remembrance." Medieval European students tucked sprigs into their hair during exams. Mourners placed it on graves and coffins as a symbol of memory. Wedding guests carried it for fidelity. For centuries, across one of the most literary and philosophical cultures in history, rosemary was synonymous with the human mind's ability to hold on to what matters. And now, neuroscience is telling us those scholars might have been right. Rosemary contains carnosic acid, a diterpene with documented neuroprotective properties. It activates the NRF2 pathway, which plays a central role in defending neurons against oxidative stress, the kind of cellular damage associated with cognitive decline. Studies published in Therapeutic Advances in Psychopharmacology found that rosemary aroma exposure significantly improved cognitive performance on memory and attention tasks. A clinical trial showed that 1,8-cineol, a primary compound in rosemary essential oil, was positively correlated with cognitive speed and accuracy when present in participants' bloodstreams after aroma exposure. Run your fingers along a rosemary sprig, and the texture is distinct. Narrow, needle-like leaves, stiff and slightly waxy on top, with a pale underside. The aroma is immediate and complex. Pine-like, slightly camphoraceous, warm with a woody resin base. It grows in Mediterranean climates, in herb gardens, along sunny walls, and in pots on balconies worldwide. People use it in cooking, in teas, as essential oil for focus, and as a culinary herb that quietly supports the brain with every meal it flavors. Rosemary didn't get forgotten. It got domesticated, pulled from the apothecary, and put in the kitchen, stripped of its medicinal identity, and reduced to a seasoning. But carnosic acid doesn't stop being neuroprotective because you sprinkled it on chicken. The most familiar plant on this entire list may be the most underestimated. The memory guardian has been guarding your memory the whole time. You just didn't remember to notice. Final echo, so here's where you are now. 20 plants, thousands of years of documentation, hundreds of modern studies confirming what traditional systems already practiced. You started this list thinking a weed was just a weed. You're ending it knowing that the ditch you drove past this morning, the vacant lot at the end of your street, the cracks in the sidewalk outside your door, they're not empty. They never were. You're not looking at weeds anymore. You're looking at a pharmacy that's been open for thousands of years. The knowledge wasn't hidden. It was just waiting for you to look down. Next time you see that cracked sidewalk with the broad-leafed plant pushing through, you'll know its name. You'll know what Roman soldiers knew, what your grandmother knew, what clinical researchers confirmed, and you'll know something else. Something no bottle at the drugstore can give you. You'll know that power doesn't always come packaged. Sometimes it just grows.